Hari Om friends, Namaste. This is Yogeshwar Shastri and welcome to the third part of the series on British revenue extortion in Bharat. And in this series, as you know, I am taking a look at Tirunelveli district quite specifically, which is a district in Tamil Nadu. And this video series is based on my blog article, which I have published on my blog, and I have given a link in the description as well. So in the previous episodes, we kind of had an overlook at the history and the geography of Tirunelveli district. In this episode, we'll particularly focus on the revenue system in the pre-British era, especially under Hindu rulers. Now, as we know, for a large part of the last 600 odd years, Tirunelveli district was under the Vijayanagar emperors, so Hindu rulers. After the Vijayanagar Empire disintegrated in early 1600s, one of their very powerful feudatories called the Madurai Nayakas kind of took over this portion. So for a large part, especially till 1730s, especially, this was very much under Hindu rule. And the Muslim rule was really interregnum of around 50 to 60 years before the British formally took over. So pre-British land revenue system was very different. So British focus was always on trying to get the maximum money out of the Indian people. And under Hindu rulers, revenue was collected in kind, not in cash. So in kind means it was collected as a proportion of the output of the field. So if a field produced, say, 100 kilos of rice, just as an example, so the state would collect a certain percentage. Say state would collect maybe 5 kilos of rice or 10 kilos of rice. Instead of asking the farmer, okay, you go and sell the produce, and then we think that you should pay us this much revenue in cash and give us the cash. That's very difficult for farmers to do, and it's a very loss-making proposition. And I'll explain in as we go further down the series, because I'll be looking at this issue in a lot of detail, especially the agricultural side of things. And the part that the farmers hand over to the state from their produce could vary. So this could be from 10 to 30% depending on what they reaped in a year. And if the rains failed or there was a drought, and there was a fear that famine would happen, the amount of grain they would have to give to the state or the Hindu rulers would proportionately go down. And in some years it was completely relaxed, depending on the rains and hardship of the people, etc. So very important thing to remember: the British took revenue in cash, okay, and they employed a lot of different methods: torture, beatings, killings, brutalization, land grabs, everything under the sun to get their money. Hindu rulers always in kind, so a proportion of your produce. You did not have to run to the market and sell your produce at a loss. And remember, we are talking almost 200 years back when there were no automobiles, no trucks, uh, you know, tar roads were not there. So movement from, say, a village to a tehsil or where the main market was very difficult, and farmers usually didn't do it because it was a very expensive thing to take the produce to the market and then try to sell it to the wholesalers, and the wholesalers would obviously pay them a very low price because they had their own markup on top. So the British, in their quest to extract as much wealth as they could from the Indian populace, really made lives miserable. Okay, so let's have a look at the next slide. And prior to 1739, as I mentioned, Tirunelveli was under Hindu rulers, and the prosperous state of things is illustrated by comment from A.J. Stewart. Now, this gentleman compiled the 1879 manual for Tirunelveli district. These manuals were compiled every 40-50 years because the British administrators, the collectors, who kept changing every 3 years, needed some kind of a reference guide, kind of a Tirunelveli for dummies kind of book to understand, what the district was and what was happening. So these manuals were produced for a majority of districts in India. They were either called the gazetteers or manuals or guides or something like that. So what Stuart said, and I'm quoting him verbatim here: all we know is that its last 4 centuries produced the temples and irrigation works of Tirunelveli. So British, again, they couldn't pronounce anything, so they used to call Tirunelveli as Tirunelveli. A government whose wealth and whose tastes are manifested by the temples and statues of Tirunelveli, and whose readiness to employ all its resources for the benefit of its people, as proved by the number and nature of the irrigation works which it completed, implies a contented and prosperous people, while a high state of the arts and of knowledge is abundantly testified by the exquisite design and workmanship discoverable in many of the temples and statues, as well as by the grasp and mastery of the principles of irrigation. Very important to note, a complicated and difficult branch of the engineering are displayed in their irrigation system. So it was not like the British brought anything. And the craziness of modern India is there was this collector called I think A.J. Cotton, and he's got a statue, and he's still garlanded in I think the Godavari, Krishna Godavari part of Andhra Pradesh, because he did canals and everything. But what people don't realize is these fellows ruined everything and then only built canals where it's gave them the maximum amount of revenue. Okay. So this is a painting I downloaded from Wikipedia. It's of the remains of the Madurai Nayaka's palace. So again, a very magnificent line of branch of rulers. Okay, so let's move on. And there's another point I want to make. So I've covered this in a lot of detail in my monograph or the article on my blog. So please be sure to read it. But just to kind of quickly summarize. So villages in Bharat, especially in southern India, had a very sophisticated system of village land distribution and village rights and how the revenue from the common lands was shared. Okay. So village land rights were typically distributed among the farmers and a lot of other, people such as village chowkidars. So in Tamil Nadu, they were called kavalkarar. I'm not pronouncing it right, but I think if there's somebody from Tamil Nadu in the audience, they can correct me. And tradesmen, so this could be blacksmiths, cobblers, barbers, washermen. So what this meant was everybody had a stake in the village, not just the people who owned the lands, but even the tradesmen, everybody had a stake in the village. So, and even weavers obviously, and entire jatis, again jatis is not caste, were beneficiaries even in very hard times. So if there was a drought and there was a shortage of grain, it did not mean that the tradesmen would go hungry and starve to death, which is what happened in the British time. So this was a very sophisticated system where basically it was like, you were part of a cooperative where you owned shares in the cooperative. So I'm based in New Zealand, and New Zealand, the biggest milk producer in New Zealand is a company called Fonterra, which is actually a cooperative. And I don't know how many farmers are actually members of that cooperative. Same thing in India, you got Amul, which is essentially a cooperative. And you got farmers who are got people in the dairy industry who are members of that cooperative. And so everybody grows when the village grows or the village prospers, and nobody is left behind. So very important concept of the pre-British system in India. Another interesting point, now land did not have any sale or resale value because the concept of selling land simply did not exist. This might sound very strange now because land was regarded as a hereditary possession, and it was a very rare occurrence for someone to be dispossessed of their land. So the bank people coming to your home and kicking you out and then doing a mortgagee sale, that did not exist. Even if the Raja or the Hindu ruler was not happy with you or had a problem with you, he did not have sole rights on the land. So while he could demand, say, give me a part of your farm's produce or give me some revenue, he did not have the right to kick out the farmers even if they were unable to pay. Okay, so very important point. And the British kept crying on this because they introduced the concept of, dispossessing people, taking over lands in case the owner went into arrears. So a lot of big zamindaris, like 40,000, 50,000, 100,000 acres were split up into small parts because the collectors wanted to make money. They also used to get commission. So the entire system was corrupt. and they kept crying even till 1860s that land has no sale value, we are trying to get this land sold and there are no buyers, the market value isn't going up and so on. So these things seem very strange now. And another side point I will mention is income tax did not exist in India. So income tax was introduced by the British in 1860. So if you look up the Income Tax Act, it has its origins in 1860s. This was done because the British wanted to recoup the money they had spent in killing and suppressing uh, the Great War of 1857-1858 in India. So we basically ended up paying for our own butchery. So the British are absolutely kind of past masters at this game. So again, okay, next slide. And again, one more interesting aspect is the system of village chowkidars or village policemen, which existed in the pre-British times. And this was funded by a system known as the Kawal system. So Kawal was essentially kind of a tax, and there are different kind of Kawals. So this was the Bharatiya system of law enforcement in rural Tamil Nadu, and this came during the rule of the Vijayanagara Empire. And this system functioned by dividing policing duties into different aspects such as protection of crops, peoples, animals, property. And the Kaval was essentially a tax, and there are different type of Kavals. So Desha Kaval was a tax to employ an armed force to protect a group of villages. Sthala Kaval was a tax to protect a particular village, and so on. So Vijayanagara Empire was, it has an interesting kind of, you could say, administrative division. So Sthala was the lowest unit, which was essentially a village. Uh, and then you had Desha and different gradations. I don't remember them exactly. So this system went on for a long time, even till the British kind of got their grips in Tirunelveli district. And the local police, which who were known as the Kavalkarars, were the support system for the Polygars as well. Remember the Polygars, whom the British kind of crushed. So when the English destroyed the Polygars, they took active steps to eliminate the Kavalkaras as well. And this led to a very prolonged struggle, literally going into early 1900s, where finally they were classed as a criminal tribe. Okay, but by this time, see, they were in a very bad state because they had been replaced by bandits who were the British police, who were really bandits, in uniform. And these poor fellows were driven to misery, penury, starvation during the famines, which kind of started taking place right from 1800, pretty much almost till when the British left India. Okay, so that's all for this time. And in the next series, sorry, the next part of the series, we look at the Muslim phase, which was very short, and the British takeover of Tirunelveli district. And in the subsequent parts, we will also understand the different revenue systems the British employed, because at every phase their main worry was that they are not getting enough money from the land, or they're missing out on some revenue. Okay, so they didn't want to miss out on even the last penny. So they kept fine tuning and changing the revenue system. So from 1800s right to 1920s, 1930s, the revenue system went through different permutations and combinations. But we'll have a look at that in the subsequent episodes. Okay, friends, if you enjoyed this video, if you learned something new, please do remember to like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you in the next part. Hari Om.